Imagine night slowly descending, and the air growing still as the last light fades from the horizon. There is no bustle of cities, no sound of vehicles. Only the whisper of wind brushing against leaves like a soft voice carried from the past. Sit comfortably. Let your body grow lighter and release the burdens that weighed upon your mind throughout the day. Envision a world far simpler, a world where humans knew no writing. No machines, only earth, fire, and the endless expanse of the sky. We will walk gently into that time, unveiling the stories of hunters who lived thousands of years ago. They left no written record, yet shadows of their existence still linger, faintly felt even now. Listen quietly, breathe slowly. Let this voice accompany you on a long journey. And if your eyes begin to grow heavy, do not resist sleep, for this tale will continue, weaving the rhythm of time as a soft lullaby. Now imagine a small fire lit before you, its flames glowing orange and red, dancing slowly as if it knows the night is when it must keep watch. Fire was the first companion of humankind, warming bodies that shivered, giving light to eyes afraid of the dark, and offering a sense of safety when the calls of beasts echoed from afar. Sit closer to this fire in your imagination. Feel each spark that rises into the air like stars falling from the night sky. Let this fire carry you deeper into calm, into a peace untouched by modern time. Around the fire, envision a circle of prehistoric humans sitting together, their faces flickering with light, their eyes staring blankly into the flames, as if searching for answers they never found. They speak little, perhaps only with gestures or soft murmurs. But behind that silence lies something vast, fear, hope, prayers that were never recorded. As we sit with them in this imagined circle, let your body sink further into relaxation, as though becoming one of them, waiting for the night to pass, waiting for stories not spoken with words, but told through the shadows and the firelight. Tonight, we will walk with them, following the path of shadow hunters who faced the last beasts of prehistory, creatures that now live only in legend, but once shook the earth with their steps and roars. Around 40,000 years ago, the earth was nothing like what we know today. Vast plains stretched endlessly, with dense forests, frozen steppes, and great rivers rushing with chunks of ice carried down from distant mountains. It was an age when humans lived in small groups, moving from one place to another, following the seasons, the trails of prey, and sources of water that could save them from thirst. The sky felt closer then. The stars shone brighter, as if speaking to the humans who gazed at them from their campfires at night. Among those landscapes, there were vast caves that became shelters, their walls holding images painted with blood, charcoal, and red earth marks, that declared they had been there, that they had seen something so immense it deserved to be preserved. In the dark forests, the shadow of mammoths moved slowly, their massive bodies towering, their long ivory tusks gleaming under the moonlight. Herds of wild horses dashed across the grasslands, their hooves raising dust that lingered only a moment before the wind carried it away. Cave lions, giant bears, and ancient wolves waited in the shadows, ready to strike at any moment of weakness. That age was filled with both fear and wonder. for humans were a small part of a vast and wild world, and every day was a struggle between life and death. There were no cities, no civilizations, only fragile bodies depending on fire, sharp stones, and togetherness to endure. Yet within that fragility, humans carried something different: an awareness of time, an ability to remember and imagine. So they recorded their lives, not with letters, but with footprints in the soil, with scars in bone, with images on cave walls that remain for us to see today. From there, we begin to glimpse a strange world, a time that feels distant, yet still pulses within our blood. At some point in that age, the lands we now know as Europe, Asia, and parts of Africa were still wrapped in the embrace of the Ice Age. Glaciers stretched far from mountain peaks, covering valleys and forcing both humans and animals to seek safer paths along the frozen plains. The cold pierced through bone, every breath emerging in clouds of vapor that quickly vanished, as if the earth itself swallowed every sign of life. Yet within that harsh cold, there were small places of warmth, valleys shielded from the wind, caves with thick walls strong enough to resist the bite of the night air. It was there that groups of early humans gathered, sitting in circles before fires they never allowed to die out. Fire was life. Fire was a guardian. Fire was the center of existence, simple yet sacred. From fire, they cooked the meat of their prey, dried hides, hardened spear tips, and perhaps also offered prayers never written down. Imagine when night fell, as the wind outside howled like wolves. Those ancient humans stared at the glowing red light of the fire shimmering on the walls, and their shadows danced as if ancestral spirits had joined them. In those times, the earth was not only a physical space, but also a spiritual one, filled with signs. Great stones stood like silent guardians. Rivers gleaming beneath moonlight were seen as roads to another world. And the animals they hunted were not only food, but beings with power, deserving of respect lest their spirits be anchored. Every step upon the ground, every track in the snow, every gust of wind carried meanings we can scarcely grasp today. We may view them as simple people with stone-tipped spears, yet within the long silence of prehistoric nights, they were sharp observers of the world, sensitive to whispers from earth, sky, and beast alike. No one truly knows what they thought, but from the cave images that remain, we can feel that they saw themselves as part of a vast web of life, not rulers, but small passengers upon an immense stage. And there the mystery lingers that among frozen bones and footprints, long erased, lies a worldview nearly beyond our reach. A world where the fire's glow, the cave's darkness, and the cry of mammoths in the distance merged into an eternal whole. When we try to imagine that prehistoric world, we are not speaking of a time with precise numbers. There are no written records to tell us who lived, who died, or what they thought on those long nights. What we have are only faint traces, stones carved by rough hands, bones buried in the earth, and blackened charcoal clinging to cave walls. These are like messages without words, a book without letters, which can only be interpreted cautiously. Archaeologists uncover those remains and attempt to weave them into stories, but the stories they tell are always full of gaps, as though the pages of history were deliberately left blank. We can only guess that thousands of years ago, There were humans standing before vast caves with feelings much like ours when gazing at the night sky wonder. Fear and curiosity that never truly fades. Those caves were not merely shelters, but sacred spaces, echoing chambers where human voices mingled with the earth's resonance. Their walls became the first canvas where they drew bison, deer, horses, and mammoths. Red lines from clay, black pigments from charred wood or manganese stone, all applied with fingers or primitive brushes of plant fibers. No one knows why they painted, whether to honor the animals, to pray for luck, or simply to immortalize what they saw. But what is certain is that each stroke upon the cave wall was proof that they wanted to be remembered, even without names. Imagine a child gazing at a parent painting a great bison on the wall of a cave. The child might not understand its meaning, but would sense something sacred there, something larger than themselves. Night after night, firelight illuminated those paintings, making shadows flicker so that the animals seemed alive once more, walking, running, leaping in trembling light. This is the mystery that still surrounds us, that within such a simple and harsh world, prehistoric humans had already created a space between the real and the spiritual, between life and death, between the tangible and the unseen. As though they left messages whispering across thousands of years, telling us that humankind has always sought meaning, always thirsted for stories, always longed to connect with something more enduring than themselves. And we, in this century, can only stand before those cave walls, gaze upon the fading images, and feel an echo that has never truly disappeared. Imagine a cold morning on the vast plains thousands of years ago, when the sun had just touched the horizon and dew still clung to the tall wild grass. Prehistoric humans awoke from their brief sleep, their bodies stiff from the piercing chill of the night. They stepped out of caves or simple huts built from branches, the bones of great beasts, and animal hides. There were no clocks, no bells calling them, only instinct urging them to move. They lived in full awareness that each day was a battle between life and death, between hunger and survival. In the distance, great animals stirred slowly, bison grazing, wild deer trotting, and sometimes the howl of wolves or the roar of cave lions echoing across the land. Children sat near the fire, clutching small stones or bones as toys, while adults inspected their tools, making sure the tips of spears were still sharp, making sure the fire remained alive. For if it went out, it would be difficult to rekindle. Some gathered wild berries, some dug for roots and tubers in the soil, and others walked farther, following the tracks of great beasts that could feed the entire group. Their lives were not governed by calendars or hours, but by the seasons, by the sun's movement, by the scent of wet earth after rain, and by instincts passed down from their ancestors. Perhaps there was a hunter who awoke earlier than the others, sitting silently at the cave's edge, gazing at the sky full of stars before the light erased him. He knew that day might bring food, but it might also bring death. Every step was a decision, every choice a wager. And within such simplicity, there was a harmony difficult for us to understand. They walked together, hunted together, ate together, and feared together. There were no written words, but there was body language, gestures, short sounds forming a simple pattern of communication. When a mammoth appeared in the distance, they exchanged glances, nodded, and moved as one. There was no official command, but there was a bond that made them seem to understand what had to be done. This was everyday life, strange to us, but for them an inescapable reality. They may never have wondered about a distant future. They only knew that today must be endured, that fire must be kept alive, that children must be fed, and that night would return with the same, cold with the same sky full of stars they never named. Yet from such simplicity emerged beauty that humanity endured not only through strength, but also through a sense of togetherness we cannot fully see. Only imagine in the long silence. Behind the shadows of low trees and thick bushes, the hunters moved with careful steps, their bodies blending with the ground, disguising themselves from the sight of the animals they sought. The animal hides they wore were not merely protection against the cold, but also camouflage so that the scent of humans was masked by the smell of the forest. Spears tipped with sharp stone were gripped tightly, while others carried heavy stones or rough but deadly hand axes of andesite. They walked in a loose line, not close, but connected enough by glances and hand signals, a silent language born out of necessity, not the words we know today. In the distance, a giant deer with sprawling antlers grazed, occasionally lifting its head, ears twitching quickly at sounds that might disturb it. The hunters held their breath, hiding behind bushes, waiting for the right moment. They knew a single mistake would send the prey fleeing, and all their drained energy would be wasted. Around them, nature became a silent witness. The small birds stopped chirping, and the air was filled with tension that only those who lived at the edge of hunger could sense. When one hunter signaled with a hand gesture, the others prepared, spears raised, muscles tense, hearts pounding. With a brief shout, they emerged from hiding, chasing the startled deer, running at full speed. Spears flew through the air, striking the animal's side, making it stagger, but not yet fall. They kept chasing, heavy breaths mingled with adrenaline, until at last the deer collapsed to the ground, its body trembling before becoming still. Silence enveloped them, not because victory was celebrated with cheers, but because every life taken was something immense, something acknowledged as both a gift and a sacrifice. They stood around the body of the animal, some bowing their heads, some placing a hand on its chest, perhaps as a simple gesture of respect before its hide was flayed, its flesh cut, and its bones prepared for tools. Nothing was wasted. Every part had a purpose, from hide for clothing, antlers for ornaments or weapons, and bones for sharper tools. The children and women waiting by the hearth would receive this bounty with relief. For at least for the next few days, their stomachs would not be empty. Yet behind it all, there was always unease, for they knew hunts could also end in failure, even in death. A wounded bison could turn and charge. A mammoth could crush human bones in an instant, and cave lions could appear suddenly, stealing the prey just one. Prehistoric life was a fragile dance between courage and fear, between hunger and satiety, between fire that burned and darkness that always waited. There was no guarantee tomorrow would be like today, And it was precisely within such uncertainty that humans learned to cling to one another, building bonds stronger than stone, deeper than rivers, more enduring than the shadows of night. Night arrived slowly, covering the sky with a black cloth studded with stars, while the campfire burned in the middle of a carefully arranged circle of stones. The light of the fire danced on the tired faces of hunters, who had just returned with fresh meat, their bodies still filled with the scent of the forest and the blood of the animals they had hunted. Smoke rose high, mingling with the aroma of burning wood and meat slowly roasting over the flames, a scent that invited both hunger and safety at the same time. Around the fire, children sat close together, their eyes wide, fixed on the stories beginning to be told by the elders. There was no writing, no record, only voices moving from one mouth to another, from one generation to the next. The stories were not always about triumphs. Often they were about failures or losses, about hunters who never returned, about strange voices in the forest that were never explained, about glowing eyes that stared from the darkness. The campfire became the center of their world at night, not only as a source of heat, but also as the final fortress holding back the darkness from swallowing their entire existence. Beyond the fire's light, there were only faint night sounds, leaves rustling gently, twigs snapping, and winds carrying voices from who knows where. Every small sound could mean danger, a hungry wolf, a cave lion lurking, or just a deceiving shadow. Yet within the circle of light, they felt as if they were protected, though that fear never truly disappeared. The elder spoke in a low, rhythmic tone, like a song without melody, weaving tales about a world that was not only filled with humans and animals, but also with spirits living in stones, waters, and trees. The children listened quietly, drowsiness beginning to envelop them, but they held on, afraid to miss even a single word of a story that might be a guide for tomorrow. The fire blazed, casting moving shadows on cave walls or on their own bodies, as if other beings were dancing with them, shadows that could not be touched, only seen briefly. In those nighttime stories, they learned about courage, but also about limits. That humans never truly ruled the world, only borrowed space, trying to survive in the gaps between forces greater than themselves. The night grew deeper. One by one, bodies lay down near the fire, eyes closing, breaths slowing. And dreams carried them into a world as dark as the night, filled with symbols, animals, and figures difficult to explain. Beyond the circle of fire, darkness waited patiently, as if reminding them they were never truly safe, that life was only a brief pause between hunger, cold, and fear. Yet it was precisely in those moments when the fire burned, stories flowed, and bodies leaned against one another, that they discovered the meaning of togetherness deeper than mere survival. That night's fire was not only heat, not only light, but also memory, prayer, and the bond that kept them human in a world full of secrets. Beyond the warm circle of fire, the night world held something humans of prehistory could never fully comprehend. From the dark trees, yellow eyes sometimes gleamed, a pair or more, watching patiently from afar, as if weighing whether it was the right moment to draw closer. Cave wolves, larger than the wolves we know today, roamed in packs, their howls sometimes echoing in the distance, sometimes so near they made the chest vibrate. That sound was not merely a sign of their presence, but also a warning that humans were only a small part of a much wider chain of life. Cave lions, larger than modern lions, were the silent rulers of the cold night. Their deep claw marks left in the soil could be found in the morning, reminders that humans were never truly alone. In the elders' tales, cave lions were often seen as forest spirits, not merely animals, but forces that could devour an entire group in an instant. That fear was not only instinct, but also a collective memory passed down, a vigilance shaping how they behaved, how they slept, even how they dreamed. The campfire was not only for cooking, but also a boundary line between the human world and the animal world. Yet that line was fragile, for the fire could be extinguished by the wind, and once it died, darkness reclaimed its rule, carrying with it all the terrifying sounds. Hunters knew they could never truly defeat such beasts. They could only delay, only avoid, only survive long enough until dawn came. Each time a wolf howl drew closer, children curled tighter against their mothers, while the men gripped their spears more firmly, even though they knew wood and sharp stone were not always enough against teeth and claws. There were moments when a great shadow seemed to move just beyond the light's reach, fleeting, brief, yet enough to make hearts pound. No one dared to chase it. No one dared to confirm what was really out there, for it was safer to let the mystery remain a mystery. That nightly fear gave birth to stories, myths, and prayers, for in such ways, uncertainty could be given form, could be given a name, even if that name was born only from imagination. In their prayers, prehistoric humans sought protection from ancestors, from spirits they believed dwelled within stones and fire, so that cave lions or wolves would not approach. Sometimes they hung bones, feathers, or animal teeth as charms, hoping those objects carried a strength that could ward off danger. Night was not merely a time of rest, but also a time of trial, for darkness always revealed human frailty. Yet it was through that constant fear that humans learned, strengthened their bonds, created strategies, and built the awareness that survival was possible only together, not through one person alone. Cave lions and wolves may never have known it, but their existence shaped the course of humanity, forcing people to think more deeply, to imagine, and eventually to create stories that endured longer than footprints in the earth. The power of those beasts of the night became a mirror, reminding that humans were never truly rulers, only passengers moving slowly through a world full of mysteries. Each time night fell with cold winds slipping through cracks in the rocks, prehistoric humans relied not only on fire for survival, but also on creating signs, symbols, and rituals, believed to guard the boundary between the human world and the spirit world. From the long bones of hunted animals, they carved simple scratches, lines that might look meaningless, yet to them carried mystical power passed down from generations before. Smooth stones taken from riverbanks were carved with circular or spiral marks, then hung at cave entrances as though forming protective gates no evil being could cross. Smoke from burning branches, especially wood with sharp scents, was left to curl into the night sky, believed to carry prayers to the spirits of ancestors. At times, fresh blood from hunted animals was dripped onto certain stones considered sacred. A humble offering so that forest spirits would not send cave lions or wolves to prey on children. Small children were often given necklaces made from animal teeth, not only as decoration, but as symbols that the strength of the beast now became part of their body, shielding them from other claws and fangs. Women wove plant fibers into tiny knots and hung them near the fire, believing those knots would trap evil spirits before they reached the sleeping humans. These rituals were carried out in silence. No shouting, no noise. Only soft whispers accompanying the movement of hands, as if the unseen world could hear better in stillness. Inside the deeper caves, walls were sometimes marked with human hands, simple imprints made with red or black pigments, as if declaring that humans had claimed this place as their domain. No one truly knew what those signs meant. Even they themselves may have only felt it as something that must be done, not something explained with words. After rituals, the night seemed a little safer, though howls still echoed in the distance, though shadows still shifted beyond the fire's light. Yet within their hearts was a sense that the fragile border between the human realm and the dark realm now had guardians, even if those guardians were only bones, stones, or smoke. These symbols were the earliest forms of belief, a language not written in words, but in repeated acts performed with conviction. Even when a child asked their mother the meaning of the scratches on a stone, the reply was often just a calm smile, as though the secret did not need explaining, but only feeling. Rituals and symbols were not only ways to drive away fear, but also ways to weave bonds among each other. For everyone participated, everyone contributed a small part of themselves to the ceremony. Thus fear, once carried by individuals, was transformed into collective strength, enabling them to face the night with more steadiness. Beneath it all, perhaps they did not know whether any spirit truly listened, or whether beasts truly feared smoke, blood, or carvings on stone. Yet, in that uncertainty, they found comfort. For what could not be explained could still be sustained by belief. And belief itself became the strongest weapon, unseen yet enduring longer than wooden spears or stone blades. So each night, under the trembling glow of fire, they continued to repeat those small rituals with the same patience, with the same faith, because in the prehistoric world, safety was not something that simply arrived, but something created with prayers, symbols, and small, humble offerings. When prehistoric humans lay asleep within the warmth of the firelit cave, their world did not end at the boundary of what was visible, but stretched further into the realm of dreams filled with signs and shadows. Dreams for them were not mere illusions of sleep, but messages sent by ancestors or signals from unseen spirits. In dreams, a hunter might see himself running with herds of wild horses or being chased by a cave lion with glowing eyes, and upon waking, such visions were not dismissed as imagination, but regarded as guidance to be interpreted. Some believed dreams pointed to tomorrow's hunting paths, while others saw them as warnings to avoid certain valleys or rushing rivers. Children who dreamed of glowing hands were thought to be receiving blessings from a protective spirit. So they were marked with charcoal on their foreheads to ensure the spirit remained. Elders often listened intently to the recounting of dreams at dawn, interpreting them in simple yet authoritative words. If someone dreamed of a great bird flying low, the group would tread carefully, believing it foretold danger from the sky, perhaps a storm, perhaps a landslide from high cliffs. Sometimes dreams brought deep dread, such as seeing the faces of the dead appear among the flickering flames. These dreams were not banished, but accepted as brief visits from souls who had departed. As though sleep opened a fragile door between the living and the dead, not all dreams were shared with the group. Some were kept secret, being too heavy, too dark, or too difficult to put into words. For some, dreams prompted journeys far away, to seek new caves, or to abandon old ones deemed forsaken by protective spirits. Sleep and dreams were guarded with rituals, such as placing a small stone near the head or scattering ashes of the fire around beds made of animal skins, to block nightmares from entering. There was also the belief that the sound of dripping water in caves could shape dreams. So children's ears were sometimes covered with soft feathers during sleep to keep the water spirits from whispering, frightening things. All of this was done with patience, never rushed, for dreams were not things to be controlled, but only to be received. In the long silence of night, as winds turned outside the cave and the fire burned faintly, prehistoric humans lay down, closed their eyes, and surrendered themselves to the dream world with acceptance. And when they opened their eyes again at dawn with dew dripping from stones, they were not merely waking from sleep, but returning from a long journey, carrying messages sometimes vague, sometimes clear, but always considered vital to their survival. In this way, dreams became part of life, as essential as hunting, kindling fire, or painting cave walls. In a world full of danger and uncertainty, dreams gave them direction, gave them the sense that beyond the darkness, something was watching, something was guiding, though they could never name it with certainty. For prehistoric humans, animals were not merely prey or threats, but reflections of their own souls, signs from another world, and companions that bridged the line between reality and dreams. When a hunter saw a great stag passing in sleep, it was not taken as coincidence, but as a message that the group should follow the stag's tracks in the forest or open plains for their food awaited. The cave lion, with sharp fangs and a powerful body, in dreams was often seen as ruler of the night, keeper of the secrets of darkness, whose presence could mean a warning to be cautious or a challenge for someone to prove their courage. Birds, especially those flying high, were regarded as messengers of spirits able to cross between sky and earth. If in sleep someone saw a bird circling, it was believed that the spirits of ancestors were watching from afar. Often a dream of animals could cause an entire group to change direction, delay the hunt, or seek a new place to settle. Animals also appeared in subtler forms, such as the cry of wolves at night, mingling with dreams of reunions with the dead, then taken as a call from souls longing for attention. Some claim to have dreamed of turning into animals, feeling their bodies run on 4 legs, or swim through rivers with slick scales. Such experiences made them believe that humans and animals were not truly separate, but only 2 forms of the same life. This is why many cave paintings depict humans with animal heads, or animals with human bodies, as though the boundary between them was thin, able to be crossed through sleep or ritual. In real life, too, animals were not only hunted, but honored. After a bison was killed, its bones might be carefully arranged near the fire, or its head placed in a cave as a sign of gratitude. So the spirit of the bison would not be angered and would allow other herds to return the following season. Dreams of wounded animals could bring tears, as they were seen as signs of having taken more than nature had given. Conversely, dreams of abundant herds brought hope that nature remained generous. That balance was still preserved. Children were often taught to remember their animal dreams, for they were considered ways in which spirits spoke to them from an early age. Animals in dreams were not always large or wild. Sometimes even a small insect could be an omen. A spider in a dream might signal the fragility of life's web, while a fish appearing from the water was believed to carry a message of change. All of this shaped the view that life did not only unfold by day, but also in sleep, with animals as the constant mediators. Even when awake, when stag tracks appeared on wet ground, or a bird's feather fell near the fire, they did not see it as chance, but as a continuation of last night's dreams. The real world and the dream world blended in ways never truly separated. And animals always stood in the middle, being both deep symbols and tangible realities they continually faced. This is why prehistoric humans never saw themselves as masters of animals, but as part of the same circle, able to endure only through respect, fear, and awe carefully maintained. For prehistoric humans, the night sky was not merely a dark expanse sprinkled with light, but an eternal canvas upon which their souls wrote hopes and fears. When the fire dimmed and the cries of nocturnal beasts echoed from afar, their eyes lifted upward, seeing the stars flickering like the eyes of spirits that never cease to watch. There was no boundary between earth and sky in their minds, for both were seen as connected reflections of one another. The slow-moving stars, the clusters forming strange shapes, the faint glow of the moon, all were considered signs, messages guiding their steps in life. When a stag ran across the plain by day, its shadow was believed to appear again in the night sky as light dancing among the stars. Children were often laid beside the fire and shown the points of light above their heads, taught that each star was the soul of someone who had once lived, now dwelling above, waiting to return, or simply watching over them in darkness. A falling star was seen as a spirit descending briefly to deliver a warning, perhaps of danger approaching, or of a journey soon to end. Many dreamed of walking among the stars, stepping across paths of light, returning with faces filled with fear and wonder. Such dreams were never taken as mere fantasy, but as true journeys of the soul leaving the body for a moment. Some believed that dreams of stars were ancestral callings, choosing someone to hold special knowledge, whether of fertile hunting grounds or lurking threats. When an eclipse occurred, whether of the sun or moon, the entire group fell silent, kindled larger fires, and chanted low tones to calm the sky, as if assuring the cosmos that balance remained intact. The night sky became an endless map, and dreams became the language to read it. At times, someone claimed to see shifting star patterns in sleep, only to find the next day a new path leading to a valley full of game. Was it coincidence, or truly a sign from the cosmos. No one could be certain, yet all believed there was a subtle connection that must never be ignored. In rituals, they painted dots on cave walls resembling star clusters, joined them with red lines, and danced before them as if imitating the movements of the heavens. They saw themselves not as small creatures trapped on earth, but as part of the sky itself, bound only briefly to the ground before the soul returned to the stars. Even the sound of the night wind was regarded as whispers from the heavens, sometimes soft, sometimes fierce, but always carrying meaning decipherable only by those who sat in stillness. Elders often said that no dream truly came from humans, for all dreams were reflections of starlight, echoes of souls descended from the night sky. This is why the heavens were part of every story, every song, every sacrifice, and every whispered prayer. They did not imagine the sky as something distant, but as a blanket always covering them, occasionally allowing a glimpse of the secrets behind it. Within every dream mingled with stars, prehistoric humans discovered themselves, their fears, and the truth that they were but small, trembling sparks in the eternal dance of the cosmos. For prehistoric humans, fire was not merely a tool for warming the body or cooking meat, but the very heart of their nocturnal existence. Every glowing ember was seen as a pulse linking the human world to the spirit world, a light separating them from the darkness filled with threats. As dusk fell and the cold crept into their bones, groups gathered around the fire, wrapping themselves in animal hides, gazing at flames that danced as if they possessed souls of their own. The crackle of wood and the curling smoke were regarded as a subtle language, words audible only to those who sat still long enough. Fire was tended carefully, never allowed to die without reason, for its extinguishing was a bad omen, a sign that protective spirits had departed. Sometimes, one person was assigned solely to keep the embers alive through the night, feeding twigs and blowing gently to keep the flame strong. This was not a mere chore, but a spiritual duty, for in the eyes of the group, that person guarded the boundary between life and death, between humanity and darkness. Children were taught not to play too close to fire, not only out of fear of burns, but because it was believed that a spirit dwelled within it, easily angered if treated carelessly. Fire was sacred, capable of giving life, yet also of seizing it without warning. Dreams of fire were taken seriously, seen as messages of birth, death, or looming journeys. Fire in dreams often appeared as a guiding figure or as a consuming blaze, its meaning dependent on the dreamer's condition. In every ritual, fire was the center of the circle, a focus all faced as though its flames were the unseen face of something greater. Rising smoke was believed to carry prayers, songs, and hopes into the heavens. When someone was ill, their body was brought near the fire, not only for warmth, but to allow the spirit of flame to burn away the sickness. Heat upon the skin was thought to absorb affliction, releasing it into the air as smoke. Fire was also the witness of stories. 4 long nights were filled with tales of ancestors, of great beasts once hunted, of spirits glimpsed at forest's edge. Every word was lit by red glow, casting moving shadows upon cave walls or listeners' faces. So stories were not only heard but seen and felt. These shadows were taken as part of the tale, as though ancestral spirits were present, listening, repeating what they once experienced. Fire was a tangible border, for many predators hesitated to approach its light. Cave lions, wolves, or hungry bears would halt at a distance, eyes glinting, rarely daring to cross the glowing circle. Fire was thus a fortress unseen, a guardian stronger than stone weapons. People believed it was not merely the light deterring beasts, but the spirit within fire protecting them. At times, glowing embers seemed to form faces or strange shapes, taken as signs, perhaps ancestors speaking. No one dared dismiss such things, for every spark, every shape in the flame could bear meaning. Fire was also part of burial. When bodies were burned or laid near embers, believed to speed souls toward the other world. Rising smoke was a delicate vessel carrying spirits across the night sky. In daily life, fire was a soothing companion, but in imagination and dreams, fire was a mysterious bridge. No night passed without fire, for without it, people felt cut off from the world and lost. To them, fire was not merely an element, but a living being to be honored, guarded, and sustained. For within every flame's tongue lay secrets of life, death, and dreams they could never fully understand. Beyond the small circle of fire, the prehistoric night was filled with sounds that could never truly be recognized. The howling of wolves answering one another, the heavy steps of unseen beasts, and the sudden flutter of nocturnal birds overhead all formed a symphony that separated humans from safety. Every sound was a sign, perhaps of danger, perhaps of nothing at all, yet never meaningless. To prehistoric people, no sound was ordinary, for each was a message, maybe from animal spirits, maybe from ancestors offering warning. Nocturnal animals were not simply wild creatures, but parts of a greater cosmos. A wolf's howl from afar might be a guardian spirit or a messenger of something watching. The owl staring from a branch was thought to possess eyes that pierced the spirit world, its cold, round gaze often linked to death or ill news. Bats fluttering in groups, their shadows dancing along cave walls, were believed to be restless spirit souls of humans who had not found their path to the afterlife, doomed to circle endlessly in the dark. The cave lion, rarely seen yet deeply feared, became a half-real, half-mythic figure. Its fangs and claws were not only physical weapons, but symbols of spirit power, defeatable only through sacrifice. When a cave lion struck, people saw it not merely as nature, but as a sign of the spirit world's anger. Bears, too, were more than beasts. They were rulers of winter. Their long sleep within caves and reemergence in spring seen as living proof of death and rebirth. Even prey animals held meaning. Deer, bison, wild horses seen under the full moon were omens of a successful hunt, while their absence foretold hunger. By day, animals were food, hides, and bone, but in imagination they were guiding spirits. Dreams often featured their forms. A hunter pursued by wolves in sleep was seen as being tested, while a woman dreaming of an owl received a warning of death within the group. Not all dreams were dire. Deer or horse often symbolized journeys, openings, or direction. Fear was balanced with reverence. Before hunts, people silently addressed animal spirits, asking leave to take their lives for survival. After death, bones might be preserved in gratitude, or skulls arranged in sacred places. Archaeological traces show bare skulls carefully placed within caves, hinting at rituals honoring animal spirits. This reveals how prehistoric humans saw animals not merely as meat, but as spiritual beings. Each creature carried meaning, and each meaning carried mystery beyond words. Even now, in cave art, animals dominate, drawn in vivid detail far more often than humans themselves. To them, animals were not just part of the world, but its very essence. Night sounds, gleaming eyes, footprints in wet earthall reminded humans they were never alone. They lived alongside beings with bodies and with spirits. Spirits that spoke through dreams, through cries, and through shadows, moving beyond the firelight's reach. The first night hunt was always a trial, testing not only courage, but also humanity's relationship with a world greater than themselves. Imagine a small group of hunters leaving the fire's circle, moving slowly into a clearing lit by pale moonlight. They carried spears tipped with roughly sharpened stone. Some bore small torches, while others relied only on eyes straining to adjust to the dark. Every step sounded loud in their own ears, though the earth was silent. Hearts beat quickly, not from cold, but from the knowledge that something unseen might be watching from behind a bush or between trees. Night hunts were not chosen, but compelled. Large animals were easier to find at night, descending to rivers to drink or crossing from forests into plains. Yet humans never truly ruled the night. Cave lions could strike without a sound, wolves could encircle unseen, and nocturnal birds startled with sharp cries. In such moments, hunters relied not only on skill, but also on prayer and belief. They murmured words taught by elders, asking animal spirits for leave to take one life. None knew if these prayers were heard, but all believed without them, hunts ended in failure or disaster. When eyes finally caught a large shadow moving slowly by the river, bodies froze. It could be a bison seeking water, a giant deer with towering antlers, or a bear or a cave lion. In that moment, decisions were demanded. They crouched, held breath, and awaited the leader's signal. Hands clutching spears trembled, not only with fear, but with the weight of responsibility. A missed throw could bring counterattack, and one mistake might mean death for all. When a spear finally flew, the crack of bone or the cry of beast filled the night, followed by silence, then panicked roars, shattering it. Night hunts were always more brutal than those by day. Blood seemed darker under the moon, and cries of animals stretched longer against stillness. Yet for them, this was not mere violence, but dialogue between human and beast. The slain animal was thought to have chosen to give itself, while the successful hunter was seen as granted the right to live a little longer. Afterward, the body was carried back to the fire. Division of meat was both practical and symbolic. Certain parts might be offered to elders in respect or placed by stones as offerings. Blood was sometimes smeared on young hunters' faces as a mark of passing their first trial. Rituals made them feel not only stronger, but closer to the spirits binding their world. Animals did not die simply, but entered stories and songs repeated by the fire. Children who listened grew with awe and fear. dreaming of the beasts, hearing their voices in sleep, blurring dream and waking. Each hunt left a mark on the collective imagination. When a hunter fell, his name was spoken alongside the beast he faced, the two entwined in story. Likewise, one who succeeded was seen as touched with power, for not all could face a great shadow in the night and return alive. In memory, night hunts were not just about food, but identity. They saw themselves as part of a long chain where human and beast tested, gave, and remembered one another. Each generation inherited the same fear and reverence. Though much changed, the night hunt remained the essence of what it meant to be human in those times. Not every night hunt ended in success and joy. At times, groups who departed with confidence returned with loss, carrying grief that lingered long. Elders often retold such stories by the fire, not to frighten children, but to remind them that the night was never truly owned by humans. One tale spoke of hunters chasing a great bison into a valley, hoping the rocks would trap it for an easy strike. But in the darkness, a cave lion lay in wait and struck the lead hunter. His cry echoed long, mingling with the lion's roar, and the group scattered. When they regrouped, only a broken spear and blood trails remained. No body was found, only earth disturbed as if holding a secret. That story lived on, reminding them that humans were not absolute rulers. The night had laws that could not be broken, and animals were not mere prey, but powers equal, sometimes greater. From such tales arose the belief that those who died in hunts did not vanish, but merged with the beast that killed them. If one was taken by a lion, it was said part of his spirit now dwelled within it. Walking the dark, gazing with eyes no longer entirely animal. Children grew with these images, both fearful and thoughtful. Understanding life and death were never fully apart. Another story told of a young hunter, too eager, casting his spear before the leader's signal. The spear wounded a great deer, but not fatally. The beast charged, goring two before fleeing. The group returned in guilt, weighed by failure. From then on, rules grew stricter: no action without a signal. And all believed escaped beasts carried vengeance, waiting to strike. Some claimed dreams of antlered deer chasing them through moonlight, glowing horns piercing the dark, waking in cold sweat. Such tales deepened the belief that dreams extended reality, and failures left scars not only on flesh, but in spirit. Elders taught that failures were not just mistakes, but messages. A fallen hunter meant misalignment, perhaps a prayer forgotten, a fire underfed, or pride blinding men into believing spear and flame ruled all. Failure thus taught deeper than success, birthing faith that humans were only guests in this vast world. Beasts became not only food, but guardians of unwritten laws. Each death brought names into prayer, and each great beast seen carried a question: mere animal or spirit returned to test them. Slowly, rituals grew from these failures. Some cast old meat into fire before hunts, feeding unseen spirits. Others traced symbols in soil with charcoal, circles, or crosses for protection. The more they lost, the heavier their layers of belief became. No one knew if it worked, yet ritual lessened fear. In collective memory, failure was no shame but a window into mystery. Night always held secrets, and every secret demanded payment through courage or through life. Children in prehistoric groups did not grow with books or writing, but with whispered stories, with shadows cast by fire on cave walls, with the calm yet meaningful voices of elders. The night was their greatest school, and flame their most patient teacher. Every tale of failed hunts or avenging beasts was its own lesson. Children sat cross-legged, wide-eyed at the flames, while adults added details that made the stories vivid. They were taught not just to listen, but to feel the tremors carried by each tale. At the mention of the cave lion, a chill seemed to slip through the rocks. At the mention of the glowing antlered deer, their skin prickled as if it waited outside, watching from the dark. Fear was not to crush them, but to remind. From early on, they knew that footsteps in the forest were not mere walking, but meetings with a world of spirits. So they learned to hear silence. They learned to tell the difference between wind in leaves and branches breaking under passing animals. They learned that silence was never empty, for something always watched within it. They learned that when an elder gripped sharp stone or wooden spear, was not just a tool, but an extension of body, of will, of prayer. Children took small roles in rituals. Some scattered ashes on soil, some held dry twigs before feeding fire. These acts bound them to life's rhythm, teaching that living was not only eating and sleeping, but keeping balance with something greater. Slowly, fear shifted into respect. They learned beasts were not enemies, but distant kin, speaking another tongue. They were told that birds flying low before rain was a message, wolves howling long at night was a warning. They grew sharp-eyed and keen-eared, for their world never rested. From these tales also grew belief that dreams were windows to heed. Children were taught to share dreams in the morning, elders interpreting them. To dream of being chased by beasts meant danger near. To dream of holding unending fire meant power passing to them. No dream was random. All were messages. In this way, children learned to read, not marks on bark or stone, but signs scattered in sky, land, water, and within themselves. Sometimes a child asked why such things must be believed, why fire had spirit, why animals held souls. Elders never answered with anger, but with calm words that the world was too vast to be fully known. No one truly knew the answers, and thus humans must tread carefully. From this, they learned to embrace uncertainty as life's thread. They grew within the circle of fire, its light shifting, sometimes small, sometimes leaping, yet always there. Each flicker casting forms, faces of beasts, great hands, watching eyes. No one could say if they were illusions or presences. But to children, all were lessons that the world could not be cut between real and unseen. Both were one. In night's quiet, with insect songs humming, children drifted into sleep, yet stories lingered. By morning, they played at hunting with sticks, roared like lions, leaped like deer. Their games were not mere play, but training for futures. From youth, they learned life was an encounter with mystery, and mystery was not always to be solved, but to be revered. As children reached adolescence, they were no longer mere listeners or spectators by the fire, but began to feel the call to step into the world that had long existed only in stories. The first hunt was the gateway, marking their passage out of childhood. There were no bells or formal signs announcing this change. Only the moment when an elder pointed to one youth to join the long journey into the dark forest. On the night before departure, the young one often could not sleep. The heartbeat thudded so loud it seemed the whole cave could hear. Memories of stories returned of gleaming fangs in darkness, of hot breath of beasts felt before their forms were seen. Yet alongside fear, pride slowly grew. Pride in being deemed strong enough to leave the safe circle of fire and walk where human breath mingled with animal breath. At dawn, before the sun fully rose, they went with the hunters. Dew clung to hair and furs. From afar, birds called, as if the world itself witnessed the trial. No loud encouragements were given, only the elder's gaze, meaning, now you must listen with every sense. For a moment's carelessness could turn meeting into loss. They walked in line along trails known only to seasoned hunters. The smell of damp earth, mushrooms, and beasts that had passed lingered together, creating a dizzying weight. The youth lowered eyes, tracing faint tracks on soil. Each mark, each snapped twig, became letters to be read. He saw an elder touch ground with fingers, then bring them to the nose, inhaling scent traces. Simple, yet it looked like sorcery, communion with the unseen. When prey was finally sighted, often deer or small bison, the body tensed. From behind brush, he glimpsed horns glinting, ears twitching. Breath caught, the world paused, waiting if he dared. The spear felt heavy, far heavier than in practice by the cave. Palms sweated, knees shook, and he asked inside if he truly could. But then he learned that fear was part of hunting. No hunter was wholly brave. All only balanced fear enough not to freeze. When the spear flew, whether it struck or missed, he knew he had stepped into adulthood. If it struck, murmurs of relief rippled, not shouts, but whispers that spirits had granted permission. If it missed, no scorn came, only eyes sang. Another hunt awaited. Returning after, whether with success or not, his steps were altered. No longer light like a child's, but bearing a new weight, the weight of responsibility. That night by the fire, he felt different gazes. Children looked at him with awe, as if he had entered a new world. Elders regarded him calmly, knowing the long path had just begun. From that first hunt, youths learned life was not only hearing stories, but becoming part of them. They learned blood spilling on soil was not mere meat, but a reminder that every life taken bore cost. They also learned behind joy of returning with meat was a shadow weather. The beast as spirit would one day demand reckoning. The first hunt trained not only body, but tethered them to the wider world. From then on, whenever they sat by fire and heard stories, they no longer only imagined, they remembered. The flame reflected not only shadows, but also the faces of beasts, faced, etched in memory, present with every closing of eyes. The passage was never easy, yet there lay the beginning of true courage. After a youth passed their first hunt, life slowly changed. They were no longer treated like children sitting silently at the edge of the fire, but were drawn into more serious matters of the group. Their duties were no longer only listening, but guarding the fire, carrying wood, helping prepare hides, and sometimes keeping watch at night when animal sounds drew too close to the cave's mouth. At first, such responsibility felt heavy. The fire was not just a flame that warmed, but something believed to have a soul. If it went out, fear would grip all, for protection would be gone. Thus, the newly acknowledged youth was given shifts to guard the embers. They had to ensure the flame lived, adding twigs carefully, blowing ash to keep it glowing. Many said this task was harder than hunting, for a hunt ended when the spear was thrown. But fire had to live always, night after night. From firekeeping, patience grew. Sitting before fading coals, hearing the breathing of others asleep, they felt the long, lonely stretch of night. In that solitude came pride, knowing without them the fire might die, and without fire, darkness would consume all. Alongside pride came rivalry. Not all youths advanced equally. Some read tracks faster, some threw farther, some kept steadier watch. Differences quietly bred envy. In the firelight eyes compared each other. One felt weaker, another believed elders favored them more. Envy was never voiced aloud, for sharp words could fracture unity. Yet it lingered like a shadow, watching from glances. At times when meat was divided, a youth felt their portions smaller, and eyes lingered on another's share. At other times, pride drove them harder, for each sought to prove worth. Rivalry, though silent, sustained them, for each desired to belong. In such rivalry, fire again bore witness. While tending embers, a youth reflected on their place. Would they become a great hunter, or always remain behind? They recalled the admiring gaze of children, the measuring gaze of elders, and felt pressure not to fail. Sometimes this weighed heavily, disturbing sleep. Other times it lit resolve, like flame fed with twigs to keep alive. Another duty was sharing. When game returned, all must eat. None left hungry. A youth often felt ache when hard-won meat had to be given away, but rules could not be bent. Meat was not personal property, but a spirit's gift, briefly lent. By sharing, they believed the spirit would remain calm. From this, youth learned pride was not how much they kept, but how much they gave. Sometimes sharing cut within, but strange joy arose, seeing children fed or elders smiling. This lesson slowly grew into a wider responsibility that they lived not for themselves, but for the greater circle of fire. In this, the flame again bore witness. It warmed bodies and bound souls. Its red glow reminded them that though different in strength or speed, all were tied to the same fire. None could truly stand alone, for when the fire died, all would vanish. Youth began to understand envy and rivalry were natural, but there was something larger to guard the unity of the group. From this point, they truly entered adulthood, a world of pride, duty, and silent shadows. Young women in prehistoric groups held roles as crucial as the hunters, though their tasks often unfolded behind the scenes. They cared for children, prepared the hunted or gathered food, and ensured the dwelling remained warm and safe from wild animals or unpredictable weather. Mornings began with carrying water from the river. mixing roots or leaves into remedies to maintain the health of the group, and watching the fire to keep babies and children from freezing. Their skilled hands wove hides into clothing, twisted fibers into rope, and prepared simple tools for hunters. While these tasks seemed routine, each action carried knowledge passed down through generations. For example, recognizing leaves that repelled insects, or reading signs in the sky and ground to forecast weather. This knowledge was often unspoken, shown through habitual gestures. In this process, young women also learned of pain and loss, for not all children survived. Some died before truly knowing the world, and they carefully buried the small bodies, asking spirits to remain calm and not bring misfortune. Such experiences shaped a deep serenity and respect for life and death left unspoken. Young women also learned to read faces and behavior. They observed tensions among hunters, sensed children's fears, and sometimes detected envy or jealousy invisible to others. In the silence of the cave or around the fire, young women often acted as mediators. They understood the group's balance depended on subtle interactions, and a gentle word or attentive gaze could ease conflicts. The social bonds they built often determined the survival of the entire group. Children clung to them, mimicking movements, words, and sounds. They copied fetching water, lighting fires, or stirring food. Women who had passed through these first experiences felt growing responsibilities. They were no longer children playing without thought, but individuals upon whom the lives of others depended. Whether keeping babies warm or the fire alive, nights could be long when nocturnal animals drew close, or rain hammered the cave roof. They stayed awake, comforting children, singing inherited songs, making use of every second to ensure safety. In that quiet, calm reflection emerged. Young women considered their relationship with nature, with group members, and with children who might become the next generation. They realized that every action had consequences, and small attentiveness could mean the difference between safety and danger. From daily experiences, pride grew, but hidden sadness lingered. They were proud to preserve life and pass on knowledge, yet saddened by the ever-present shadow of death, knowing not all efforts guaranteed survival. They learned to accept uncertainty calmly, like accepting the night wind that could not be changed. Over time, young women became keen observers, able to recognize shifts in moods, read signs of nature, and adjust behavior to maintain group harmony. They knew that unity and balance could not be forced, but built through care, respect, and patience. In this way, they understood strength was not only in physical ability, but also in social awareness, observation, and self-control. Their tasks might seem simple to outsiders, yet each movement held meaning. Each action had impact. Again, each night became a lesson in life and death. Young women learned to balance strength, gentleness, patience, and courage. They became unseen pillars, crucial supports for the group's survival, linking past to future through daily acts that seem simple but contain secrets, experience, and resilience known only to those living in the shadows of caves and fire. A great hunt was always both anticipated and feared, for success could ensure the group's survival for weeks, while failure or even the smallest mistake might mean death. On a cold morning, while mist still covered the plains, the men and young hunters gathered at the forest's edge. They had tracked a herd of prehistoric bison roaming the open fields. Massive creatures with heavy bodies and sharp horns, capable of destroying a hunter with a single charge if attacked carelessly. Preparations were meticulous. Spears sharpened to deadly points, some tipped with flint bound by sinew. Strategy was shared without long words, for most communication relied on hand signs, nods, and steady gazes. The hunters spread into a half circle, aiming to drive the herd into a narrow valley where escape would be difficult. Others lay in wait behind rocks and shrubs, ready to cut off any retreat. Meanwhile, women and children stayed far behind, some watching anxiously from a distance, others praying silently that ancestral spirits would guide the hunters. When the first bison sensed humans, tension spiked. Breath came fast, hands clenched spears, eyes fixed on the restless beasts. A sharp cry rang out. Stones were thrown to startle the herd. The massive animals surged forward. Dust billowed. The ground shook. And their pounding hooves thundered like approaching storms. At that moment, hunters had to remain calm, waiting for the right second to leap from hiding and hurl their spears with all their strength. A wounded bison would stumble, and other hunters would rush in to ensure it could not rise again. But danger was never far. An enraged bull could charge with terrifying speed, shattering bones, tearing flesh, and throwing a hunter to the ground. More than once, young hunters had fallen in such hunts. Their bodies left behind, remembered only in brief laments, before the group returned to the cave with fresh meat. Fear always lingered, but there was no choice. Without the hunt, there would not be enough food to face winter, and hunger could erase the entire group. Thus, despite every step brimming with risk, the hunt continued with discipline, patience, and courage passed down as though by blood. When a bison finally fell, there were no loud shouts, only quiet sighs of relief. Its body was cut, its blood left to seep into the earth, sometimes accompanied by leaves or stones as an offering, asking forgiveness from the animal's spirit. The meat was shared fairly, special portions reserved for elders, children, and pregnant women, while bones, hides, and horns were kept for tools, clothing, or ritual adornments. A great hunt was more than food. It was a bond of the group. Those who took part shared pride, and the story of the hunt would be retold at night around the fire. Children listened wide-eyed, imagining the bravery of men who faced giants. Though deep inside, they began to learn that courage always walked hand in hand with fear that never truly disappeared. Every detail left an imprint. The final gaze of the fallen beast, the gasping breath of hunters. All became part of the collective memory, one that would later be passed down through stories, cave paintings, or rites of respect. In this way, the hunt was not merely an act of survival, but part of identity. A reflection of courage, sacrifice, and the intricate relationship between humans and the other beings who shared this harsh and mysterious world. When the hunt ended and the great bison was finally brought down, the atmosphere slowly shifted from tension to relief, though not too loud joy as we might imagine. The surviving hunters sat on the dusty ground, their bodies drenched in sweat and sometimes stained with blood, whether from their own small wounds or from the fallen beast. Some still trembled with adrenaline, their eyes fixed blankly on the giant body lying still. They knew victory always came at a high cost, for death was never far when a single mistake could prove fatal. After ensuring the animal was truly dead, the hunters carried out time-worn actions passed down through generations. Spears were pulled free, the belly slit open to remove the organs, and blood was left to soak into the earth. Dried grass was scattered over it as though an offering to the ground that sustained them. This small ritual required no words, only symbolic gestures, a form of respect so that the spirit of the animal would not hold resentment toward those who killed it. The meat was cut into large sections, tied with hides and sinew, and carried back to the cave. It was heavy and cumbersome, requiring hunters to take turns lifting. Women and children who had waited from afar slowly approached, some carrying hide pouches or woven baskets to help gather the pieces. Relief mingled with worry on their faces, relief that food had been secured, worry that someone might not have returned. If a hunter had fallen, soft weeping would be heard. Though never long ceremonies, only brief laments before attention returned to the needs of survival. Life in that age allowed little space for long mourning, for every hand was needed to endure. When the group returned to the cave, the atmosphere felt like a silent celebration. The fire was stoked higher, smoke rising into the night, and fresh meat was roasted on open flames or boiled in hide vessels with hot stones. The smell of burning meat filled the air, drawing all closer. Yet even in abundance, there was no raucous feasting. They ate calmly, sharing pieces, children fed first, elders receiving special cuts, and pregnant women given hearts or organs thought to carry life's strength. Each bite was taken with quiet gratitude, without the need for words. Around the fire, warmth spread like a protective circle. The blaze was not merely for cooking. It was an invisible wall guarding them from the night. Stories of the hunt were retold not in boastful tones, but as a calm record for children to learn. They heard of the bison herd stampede, of spears cast through the air, of the beast's final collapse. Children listened wide-eyed, watching the shadows of hands draw the scene in the firelight. They learned, without realizing it, that one day they too would stand in that dangerous circle. Yet behind this simple joy, there lingered quiet fear. The fallen bison-esque carcass outside remained a reminder that humans were only a small part of a larger world. Other herds still roamed, and beyond them were creatures far more dangerous. The fire gave temporary safety, but shadows at its edge always seemed alive, as if something waited beyond sight. Thus the night's feast was never free of vigilance. Some stood guard, spears in hand, eyes fixed on the dark, ears attuned to faint sounds from the forest. Such celebrations were not merely about full stomachs, but about reinforcing bonds. They sat close, wrapped in firelight, their voices low, as though the flames themselves deserved reverence. Each person, young or old, felt part of something larger, a cycle of life where humans were only one of many beings who gave and took. That night, though their bellies were filled, their hearts were also heavy with respect for the creature that had given its life. Fear, gratitude, and togetherness mingled like embers slowly fading, leaving warm ash. Ash that one day the wind would scatter, though its memory would remain within them all. The night after a great hunt was always the longest and most meaningful. The fire was stoked high, as if to rival the stars scattered across the sky. Smoke rose slowly, mingling with the aroma of roasting meat and the crackling sound of burning wood. Everyone gathered closer to the light, sitting in a circle, children held tightly in the arms of their parents to keep warm. Beyond the fire's glow, darkness thickened, and every sound from the forest seemed louder than usual. Sometimes a night bird cried, sometimes branches cracked, sometimes the wind carried unfamiliar scents. Yet the fire gave the illusion of protection, its orange-red glow like an invisible wall that darkness could not cross. Around the flames, some began to hum ancient songs with no clear words, only repeating tones rising and falling like waves. The sounds were low drones, shifting into rhythmic beats on stone or wood. The simple rhythm was accompanied by hand gestures or body movements, not organized dances, but spontaneous gestures born from feeling. Children sometimes imitated, giggling softly before being hushed by parents. The songs were not mere entertainment, but rituals to keep spirits away, to prevent the soul of the hunted animal from returning to haunt them. None truly understood the meaning, but tradition required the chants, as though abandoning them would invite misfortune. A few elders sat apart, their faces carved in firelight, wrinkles like etchings in stone. They rarely joined the singing, instead nodding slowly or closing their eyes as though listening to something beyond hearing. At times, they spoke quietly of past hunts of larger beasts, of those who vanished and never returned. The stories were told without drama, only as records to be remembered. Children listened intently, not fully understanding. Yet the memories would remain and one day be retold by their own voices before the same fire. Though the atmosphere felt warm, unease lingered. Shadows moving beyond the circle of light often drew wary glances, hoping it was only branches swaying in the wind. At times, the eyes of animals flashed in the dark, catching the firelight, making the group fall silent until the glow disappeared. They knew the night was never truly empty. Beyond the glow, predators always waited, unseen threats lurking. The fire was only a temporary shield, never an eternal fortress. The night wore on with chants fading, bodies leaning on one another in weariness, children asleep in arms, and adults taking turns on watch. Their eyes half closed, their ears ever alert. Life allowed no full rest. Yet within that circle of fire, for a fleeting while, they could pretend the outer world did not exist, that only warmth, light, and togetherness remained. That was a night not forgotten, a night when humans sat by the fire, sang in a language already lost, and hoped to endure until dawn arrived, bearing a light stronger than any flame. Dawn arrived slowly, not with sudden brilliance, but with a faint glow creeping from the eastern horizon. At first, only a thin gray-blue line split the darkness. Then light grew stronger, little by little, making tree silhouettes stand clearer. Dew clung to the grass, glistening with the first light, as if the earth itself exhaled after a long silence. The great fire that had roared through the night was now reduced to glowing embers, sending thin smoke into the cold morning air. Around it lay scattered animal bones from the hunt, some split open for marrow, others still intact, awaiting use. The fading scent of roasted meat mingled with charred wood, creating an atmosphere half warm, half somber. Those who had slept near the fire stirred awake with slow movements. Some rubbed their faces, some drew deep breaths, others reluctant to open their eyes. Children who had slept in their parents' arms blinked in a daze, still caught in dreams. Morning always felt colder than night, for the fire had weakened and bodies lost the warmth once preserved by the circle of embers. A few adults rose at once to revive the flames with dry twigs, blowing gently until sparks caught and fire returned, though smaller than before. At the camp's edge, some walked slowly to the river to fetch water. Its surface was veiled in mist, reflecting the gentle light of dawn. They washed their faces, felt the sting of cold, then carried vessels of water back for all to drink. Morning was not a time of rest, but the beginning of new tasks. The meat from the hunt had to be cut, dried, or smoked to last. Bones had to be split further for marrow, and hides laid out to dry before being used for clothing or shelter. All was done in quiet routine, each person knowing their task without instruction. Yet beneath emotions lingered something else. The morning after a great hunt always left a strange feeling. There was gratitude for survival, for food secured for coming days. But there were also shadows in the mind of the slain beast, of spilled blood, of spirits perhaps circling nearby. Elders often glanced toward the forest, silent as though seeing what others could not. Sometimes they drove a stick into the earth and placed a small piece of meat atop it, a silent offering to the vanished soul. Children often wondered, though rarely aloud, whether the beasts were angry, whether they would return in dreams, or wait in the darkness of future nights. Questions were never clearly answered. Adults only taught to keep the fire alive, to sing at night, and to always give a portion back to earth or river. No detailed explanation, only repeated acts handed down without reasoning. This made the morning after a hunt heavier than ordinary mornings, a silence filled with meaning unspoken. As light grew, shadows faded, and the sun rose to spread new warmth. Yet the embers at the camp's heart remained as a sign that the night had been lived a night of chance, fears, and togetherness. Those embers would soon be only ash, but the ash itself was part of their story, as vital as the meat stored or the hides drying. Morning was not simply a new beginning, but a reminder that each night survived was a small victory worth remembering. When the sun rose higher, the group prepared to leave their temporary camp. The ashes of the fire were left to the wind, a circle of charred earth soon to vanish with the first rain. There was no ceremony of parting, only brief glances from some adults toward the ashes, as if silently greeting the night they had endured together. Bones left unused lay scattered, to be taken by wild animals or simply rot under sunlight. Belongings were tied in hides or woven baskets, and the group began walking in the familiar order they had followed for generations. The morning journey began slowly. The air was still cold, though the sun warmed the ground. They walked paths marked not by signs, but by memory of trees, rivers, and stones that served as natural markers. Children were kept in the center, safe from being lost. Hunters took the lead, eyes sharp for danger or opportunity, while the older and weaker followed at the rear. No shouts, no commands, only gestures and movements shared in quiet understanding. Step by step, they moved farther from the place of last night's fire. Their tracks pressed into damp earth, faint lines soon to be covered by fallen leaves or washed by rain. Yet they believed such tracks could also be read by others, not only by humans. Thus they walked in deliberate patterns, making little noise, keeping close together. In that sense of unity lay also caution, for the forest was never truly empty. Birdsong called from high branches, sometimes answered by cries farther away. A deer leaped suddenly from the thicket, startling the children before vanishing into the trees. Its trail stirred whispers among the hunters, but they did not give chase. They knew the journey was long, and not every animal could be pursued. Energy must be saved, and hunts made when new food was truly needed. This morning was for moving, for leaving one place for another. Yet amid the order lingered a shadowy feeling. Some turned their heads to the path behind. Nothing visible, only trees swaying in the breeze. But instinct, honed through generations living with danger, told them something might follow. Perhaps a beast drawn to the scent of meat, perhaps another group watching in silence, or perhaps only thoughts lingering from a night of fire and song. The feeling was never spoken aloud. They only tightened their formation, keeping children close, voices soft. In silence, they pressed on across tree roots rising from earth, across cold biting streams, through moss-covered stone passages. Each step reminded them the world around was older and wider than they understood. Behind any bush might be unseen eyes. Any snapped twig might signal danger. Yet still they walked, for stopping was not an option. At last they reached a small sunlit clearing. From there they saw a wider view, the forest stretching out, a silver line of river in the distance, a rocky hill rising like a silent guardian. They sat a while, laying down burdens, drinking water from leather skins. Children ran in short bursts, laughing softly before being hushed. For a moment, the feeling of being watched faded, replaced by warmth of light and relief of movement. Yet deep within, they knew their steps were always followed by something unseen. As they moved on from the small clearing, their steps descended into a damp valley. The earth was dark, covered with rotting leaves that held rainwater. The smell of wet soil mixed with moss and decaying wood filled the air. They walked carefully, for the ground was slippery, roots jutting out like old hands grasping the earth. It was here that the lead hunter suddenly stopped, raising his hand to signal the group to slow. Silence fell, broken only by dripping water and the whisper of wind. All eyes followed his gaze downward. There lay a massive track. It resembled a footprint, pressed deep by a heavy body. It was nearly twice the width of a man's foot, deep enough to hold a small pool of water. The edges were fresh, not yet worn by rain or wind. Mud inside was still wet, as if the creature had passed only moments before. Instantly the mood shifted. No panic, no cry, only a silence deeper than before. Every person, even the children, knew what it meant. They walked not alone, but on the path of something far larger, far stronger. The hunter crouched, touching the rim of the track, raising a finger slick with fresh mud. The gesture was simple, yet it reminded all that they were not masters of this land. The print was not of deer or boar, nor of the great bear sometimes found in these forests. Its shape was stranger, more ancient, with long claws leaving faint scars in the mud. It seemed the beast did not merely step, but dragged part of its weight, or was too heavy to walk cleanly. Eyes met, questions unspoken but heavy in their silence. Time slowed. Children were pulled closer to the center. Elders and women formed a quiet ring of protection. Younger hunters spread left and right, peering through the thin mist clinging to the trees. Every ear strained for the faintest sound. Every eye searched for the smallest motion. Yet only water flowed, only shadows shifted. A whisper broke the silence. An old hunter muttered a name, an ancient word with no clear meaning. Perhaps a title for a creature believed to survive from ages past. The word lingered, adding to the hush. None replied, but all carried the name in their minds. A beast, a primal shadow moving unseen, leaving only marks upon the earth. Whether real or imagined, none could know. But the footprint was real, its mud still fresh. They did not move at once. They waited, listening as though the earth itself might answer. The sun faded behind thin clouds, dimming the valley. Mist thickened among the trees. Still, nothing stirred, no branch cracked, no shape moved. Only the track remained, mute, a reminder of something beyond them. At last, the leader raised his hand, motioning forward. Slow, cautious, they must continue. They did not erase the track, nor cover it with leaves. Perhaps they knew it was useless to hide signs of forces greater than themselves. The track was left, exposed, like an open warning for whoever came after. Their steps resumed, breath heavy, mud breaking beneath their feet. Behind them, the track remained, silent, like unseen eyes watching. From then on, the feeling of being followed was no longer faint, but certain. As night fell, the group chose a small clearing at the edge of the valley to make camp. They lit a small fire, just enough for warmth and faint light. Flames danced through the mist, casting shadows of trees that seemed like unfamiliar figures surrounding them. Children sat close to the fire, heads resting on adults' shoulders, faces half illuminated by the soft yellow glow. The sounds of night were amplified in the silent valley. The sighing wind, trickling water, and hidden animals rustling in the underbrush. Every small noise made their hearts race, yet no one screamed or panicked. They knew panic would change nothing. The adult hunters kept watch, holding sticks and spears, eyes sweeping the shadows. They knew the footprint discovered earlier meant something larger had moved here. An unexplainable feeling of being watched lingered, as if unseen eyes observed them from the darkness. That night, each second felt longer, each breath heavier. They spoke softly, just enough to signal that all was well. loud words or laughter might draw attention from something they could not face. As the fire dwindled to glowing embers, sleepiness overtook the group. Children fell asleep first, still curled around the fire, bodies warm against one another. Adults lay or sat, still alert, ears straining to hear every whisper of the night. Among the sighs of wind and animals, faint murmurs seemed to come from the earth itself or from tree shadows. The whispers were unclear, mere vibrations that raised goosebumps and held breath. Some closed their eyes briefly, attempting calm, but the peace was fragile. In this long silence, dreams crept in. Some dreamed of massive beasts with long claws, thick fur, eyes glowing red in the dark. Others dreamed of prehistoric people chasing the same prey, united by fear and necessity. These dreams were not frightening in ordinary ways, but strange and poetic, as if the earth itself told forgotten stories. They awoke occasionally, scanning their surroundings, but found nothing real beyond mist, fire, and the slow dance of tree shadows. The wind carried the damp scent of soil and moss, mingled with smoke from the fire. The aroma kept them alert, reminding them they were alive in a world not fully known. The faint footsteps of night creatures echoed in the distance, perhaps deer or wild boar, yet in the night's tension. They sounded like warnings or invitations. Everyone understood they were mere temporary guests in a territory older and stronger than themselves. There was no room for arrogance, no time for underestimating nature. They also observed the surrounding elements. Moss-covered stones, roots curling like old serpents, and fallen leaves forming a natural layer separating them from the valley floor. Every natural movement seemed alive, as if the whole valley breathed. Watching the darkness, they could imagine shapes moving, even if only shadows from the flickering fire. Imagination and reality intertwined, creating a world where prehistoric humans and ancient beasts seemed to coexist, observing each other from a safe distance. As the night deepened, they felt time's rhythm shift. Night hours stretched, seconds slowed, and forest sounds sharpened. Occasionally, a branch snapped, but nothing emerged from the shadows. Only the sense of something greater, known only through tracks and dreams piercing consciousness. The fire became a central point, light and warmth warding off some of the fear. They knew dawn would come, and morning mist would erase traces they might never find again. Before fully sleeping, the leader whispered softly, reminding all to stay calm and watch each other. No long words, only murmured sounds like silent prayers. That night, they slept among shadows and light, reality and dreams. As dawn slowly crept into the valley, a thin mist covered the ground, giving the impression that the world was still asleep. The group woke carefully, making sure the fire still burned enough for temporary warmth and to light their simple equipment. The children rubbed their eyes, trying to recall fleeting dreams, while the adults began examining the footprints left in the damp soil. Tracks of a large animal were clearly visible, cutting through the wet earth and indicating the path of the creature they sought. They studied the footprints carefully, noting the stride, the spacing between tracks, as if the ground itself was teaching them. They followed the trail slowly, avoiding loud noises that might startle or attract attention from a creature they did not fully understand. The valley was filled with the scent of morning. Wet soil, dew-laden leaves, and the cold air brushing against skin. Trees appeared alive with droplets of dew swaying gently, while small birds began to whistle from high branches. Every movement and sound around reminded them that they were just a small part of a vast, ancient ecosystem, older than human history itself. As they moved, they noticed natural objects that drew their attention. Large stones smoothed by erosion, protruding roots that seemed to guard their path, and hidden animal nests. Adults paused to examine, touching the soil, smelling leaves, and feeling the energy held in the place. There was a collective awareness that this was not only a physical journey, but also a journey to understand a world full of mysteries where legend and reality still intertwined. The children were encouraged to observe closely. They learned to read small animal tracks, notice how leaves were pressed into the earth, and examine subtle signs of life. Slowly, they began to understand that not everything could be explained with words, that the prehistoric world had its own language to be heard with patience and calm. Every step was a lesson in caution, sensitivity, and respect for life older than themselves. Midway through their trek, they discovered older tracks, likely from the large creature they sought. The footprints were deeper and wider, seeming to whisper the presence of a being now living only in legend. Some bent to touch the soil, feeling the residual energy in the prints, as if the past interacted subtly with them. A quiet awe settled among them, free of excessive fear, because they understood observation and reverence mattered more than dominance or confrontation. As noon approached, the group found a small hidden cave behind thick shrubs. The dark, damp mouth bore signs of natural erosion and evidence of sheltering animals. They paused, sitting on nearby rocks, examining every detail. There were faint rock patterns, natural lines that seemed like symbols or messages from the past. They did not attempt to interpret them definitively, aware that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, but felt and respected. For several hours, they remained near the cave, observing the environment and learning how nature interacted. Tiny insects on the ground, animals emerging from bushes, and birds flying low became subjects of careful observation. Every movement, sound, and scent provided unwritten knowledge, teaching them about patterns of life predating human history. They mentally recorded the lessons learned, realizing that the greatest knowledge comes from patience, sensitivity, and connection with the world around them. As afternoon approached, the group began to return to the clearing where they had spent the night. They carried the day's experiences as a blend of scientific observation and poetic reflection. The children bore a deeper curiosity, adults a heightened understanding of humanity's relationship with the prehistoric world, and all carried awareness that this world is broader, older, and more mysterious than they could ever imagine. They walked slowly, respecting every footprint, every sound in the air, and every light filtering through the trees. Reminded that this journey was not merely physical, but a journey into understanding a world full of secrets and legends. As the sun began to tilt westward, its rays piercing through the gaps in the trees and casting long shadows dancing on the ground, the group paused to gaze at the valley they had traversed. A silence enveloped them, not frightening, but filled with surrender and understanding. They sat on large stones, observing every detail left by nature, from animal tracks to fragments of leaves swept by the wind. In each moment, they learned that the journey was not merely about finding a large creature or interpreting ancient tracks, but about recognizing their connection with a nature older than themselves. Some picked up stones or pieces of wood that caught their attention, examining their texture, shape, and the traces of time etched on their surfaces. Others touched the cave walls they had discovered earlier, feeling the cold stone and the smoothness of natural carvings, attempting to capture messages possibly held there. The children examined the small tracks they had passed, learning to read stories left by the earth and animals, careful not to disturb the natural balance with too many touches. The evening air carried the scent of wet soil mingled with the fragrance of leaves and blooming wildflowers. A gentle breeze carried distant bird songs from high above the trees. All these elements, though simple, formed a natural symphony that soothed them and reminded them that the prehistoric world remained alive around them, even as they merely passed through. There was an awareness in every step that honoring life that existed long before them was the purest form of respect. They shared experiences, exchanging stories about what drew their attention, from unusual tracks to patterns of stones and roots that seemed like symbols. Each tale was accompanied by soft laughter or whispered awe, forming a subtle yet meaningful network of communication. They did not need to understand everything rationally, for some mysteries were intentionally left hidden, spaces for imagination and reflection. In each conversation, they found ways to honor nature while learning from unwritten history. As the sun sank lower, the group began to pack their equipment, ensuring the fire was safely extinguished and the campsite ready for the night. A gentle satisfaction settled in, not from grand achievement, but from being part of nature's rhythm for a time. They felt a quiet connection to the earth, to the animals, and to the traces of prehistoric life that could now only be observed. In the evening stillness, everyone realized that the day's journey offered more than knowledge. It offered awe, reverence, and awareness of human limitations in facing nature's mysteries. Walking slowly back to camp, long shadows of trees and stones accompanied their steps. The wind carried faint forest sounds, and the aroma of warm earth emerged as sunlight touched the ground. On the way home, they carried the impression that the prehistoric world was an invisible teacher, imparting lessons of patience, sensitivity, and respect without words. Each step was a lesson, each breath a reminder that humans are but a small part of an unwritten, long history. As night began to rise, the group sat around the campfire, watching sparks dance into the air. They shared their fatigue and warmth, remaining silent for a moment, letting the night sounds and cool air envelop them. A gentle peace settled, an awareness that the long day had offered them a glimpse into a world older than themselves. A world full of mystery, legend, and life continuing beyond human sight. In that stillness, they learned that sometimes the most important thing is not the answer, but the experience that shapes understanding and wonder. With slow steps, tired eyes, and hearts full of respect, they closed the day. They realized that the next day's journey would bring new challenges and discoveries. Yet for now, it was enough to sit, breathe, and absorb the silence rich with meaning. Every stone, every leaf, and every animal track became part of their story. A story not fully explainable, yet always remembered as part of their journey through the mysterious and magnificent prehistoric world. Night began to creep across the sky, and the towering shadows of trees looked like silent guardians covering the secrets of the ancient valley. The group sat around the remnants of the nearly extinguished fire, aware that the world around them held layers invisible to ordinary sight. In the darkness, they began to imagine the lives that once inhabited the place thousands of years ago. Humans and animals moving in rhythm with nature, whose traces now only left faint whispers on stone soil and in the air. They spoke softly about the patterns of stone carvings, signs of ancient tools, and lines that might be symbols or messages. Their words required no answers, for some mysteries were meant to remain hidden. The night wind carried the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves, the faint sounds of insects and nocturnal animals from afar. Every sound seemed to be part of a story never recorded in human chronicles, only perceivable by those who paid careful attention. Some crouched to examine the ground around them, trying to find clues about how prehistoric animals moved, or how early humans might have marked their territories. Unconsciously, they discovered repeating patterns like faint notes in a natural symphony, connecting past and present. Meanwhile, the sky was filled with twinkling stars, their light reflecting off the hard stone surfaces, giving the impression that the rocks held secrets beyond revelation. Someone touched the cold cave wall, feeling textures that told stories of centuries exposed to wind and rain. Every crevice, crack, and line became a silent witness, and the group understood that prehistoric nature spoke through inanimate objects in subtle yet meaningful ways. They began to realize that their observations were windows into a lost world, a world real yet unseen, evoking awe and humility simultaneously. When some lit small torches to explore the deeper parts of the cave, the light moved slowly, revealing natural formations and traces of stone tools possibly made by prehistoric humans. Shadows danced on the cave walls, and in that silence, they felt like spectators from a different era, witnessing life long gone. There was a mixed feeling of awe and quietude, where fear of the unknown merged with respect for past life. They began to wonder about the creatures depicted on the cave walls, whether real,
symbolic,
or just prehistoric imagination conveyed through lines and colors. The dripping of water from stalactites and stalagmites added a mystical ambience, like the flow of time that never stops. Each drop falling produced a gentle echo, seeming like a message from the past waiting to be heard. Some sat in stillness, allowing their hearing to capture the slow rhythm of the night, realizing they were a small part of the endless natural cycle. No one spoke much. Every movement, every breath, and every silent second became a way to understand this mysterious prehistoric world. In the darkness, their own shadows seemed like ancient creatures, moving slowly and cautiously, blending with the surroundings. They realized that their fear of the unknown gradually transformed into calm curiosity. They began to feel that every stone, every track, and every symbol carried energy from past life. And by respecting it, they also respected themselves as part of the long, repeating story of history. As the night deepened, the group remained in the cave, sensing that every second added to their understanding of the mysterious, prehistoric world, a world still alive in the whispers of wind, the echo of water, and the soft flicker of firelight. With that awareness, they ended the night in silence, realizing that the layers of mystery they encountered were only a small part of something far greater. The prehistoric world, abandoned by time and history, still breathed around them. They left the cave with deep respect, carrying the feeling that every discovery, every observation, was a reminder that humans are just a small part of an endless story. That night taught them that sometimes the greatest beauty lies in uncertainty, in mysteries that remain hidden and can only be felt through silence and attentive presence. Soft morning light began to creep across the sky, the first rays piercing through the trees and creating gentle patterns on the forest floor. The group remained near the cave, observing how the night's shadows slowly vanished, replaced by the warm colors of the sun. The morning air carried the scent of wet earth, leaves, and dew clinging to stones and grass, as if reviving the hidden energy of the place that had been dormant for thousands of years. They sat in silence, letting their senses capture the most subtle details, from the sound of awakening insects to the small movements of leaves brushed by the morning wind. This atmosphere evoked a mixed feeling of peace and wonder, realizing that every element of nature contained untold stories. Some ventured deeper into the cave, observing patterns previously hidden by the night's shadows. The cave paintings appeared clearer under sunlight, with reds, blacks, and yellows coming alive, and faint lines revealing possible shapes of animals and symbols that might have held meaning for prehistoric humans. They imagined the lives of the artists, standing before the cave walls, holding natural pigments, and pouring their experiences and beliefs onto the stone surface. Every stroke felt like a direct communication from the past, inviting the observers into a world that could only be felt, never fully understood. Outside the cave, prehistoric life continued in different forms. Footprints of ancient animals may have vanished, but remnants of bird nests and small animal trails offered clues about ongoing life. The group recorded every detail, from scratches on stones to pieces of bark and scents arising from freshly dug earth. All these formed a complex web of stories that, though never written in human history, existed as a silent yet living record of nature. They began to imagine creatures that might have inhabited the valley, from large animals now only known through fossils to small predators moving under the shadow of trees. A gentle fear arose, not from actual danger, but from uncertainty. This uncertainty enhanced their sense of awe. Realizing that prehistoric humans coexisted with natural forces far greater and more mysterious than modern minds could imagine. Every second of observation became a lesson in resilience, adaptation, and the symbiotic relationship between humans and their environment. In a corner of the cave, they discovered previously unseen rock carvings, perhaps part of rituals or a form of communication understood only by certain people of that era. They touched the cold stone surface, feeling its rough texture and tiny cracks, as if the rock held secrets unwilling to be revealed. The calm yet curious atmosphere kept them cautious, understanding that each step could unveil new layers of mystery, but also reminded them that they were only temporary observers in a world that existed long before them. Sunlight entering the cave highlighted stalactites and stalagmites, casting slowly moving shadows, and the group realized that these shadows altered their perception of space. Sometimes the shadows resembled prehistoric creatures, other times like symbols moving with the light. They sat quietly, letting their imagination roam, understanding that the boundary between reality and perception became thin, and that mysteries did not always need answers to be appreciated. With eyes fixed on the cave walls and ears attuned to the whispers of nature, they began to sense a larger pattern, perhaps a cycle uniting life, death, and rebirth. This pattern was not always apparent, but there was a profound feeling that every line, scratch, and stone formation had its place in a greater web of life. They realized prehistoric humans might have understood this differently than modern humans. Yet their artistic and symbolic expressions offered a window through which present observers could feel that sense of eternity. They ended the morning with an understanding that the newly revealed layers of mystery were only a small fraction of a much broader history. Not everything could be explained or comprehended, and that was the beauty of the place. With tranquil hearts and deep respect, they left the cave carrying the sense that the prehistoric world remained alive around them, and that every discovery, no matter how small, was a reminder that life, mystery, and wonder always exist even in long silence and stillness. As the noon sun climbed higher, sunlight penetrated the prehistoric forest with varying intensity, casting long shadows over moss-covered ground and wild grasses. The group remained near the cave entrance, observing how the surroundings moved in ways almost invisible to the hurried eye. A gentle breeze slipped through the cracks in the rocks, carrying the scent of soil, wet leaves, and drying wood. Each breath seemed to convey a message from the past, a subtle whisper only detectable by those who truly paid attention. They sat quietly, letting their senses absorb nuances often unnoticed, realizing that this prehistoric world was not merely a backdrop, but a witness to a life filled with mystery. Inside the cave, rock walls displayed symbols that appeared more complex under the daylight. These patterns seemed like a concealed narrative, perhaps telling the story of prehistoric humans' journeys, their hunts, and relationships with creatures now known only through fossils and legends. The group imagined that these symbols were not merely pictures, but forms of communication uniting the community, conveying messages essential for survival. They envisioned prehistoric people staring at the same walls thousands of years ago, noticing details, possibly repeating rituals or prayers believed to bring success in hunting and protection to their community. Outside, they observed traces of animal trails, stones shaped by erosion, and a winding stream among the trees. All these provided clues about how prehistoric humans navigated their environment, found food sources, and established shelters. There was deep admiration for their ingenuity and resilience, because even without modern technology, they could read nature with extraordinary sensitivity. Every footprint, every rock fissure, and every change in soil color could convey vital information for daily life. They began to imagine the sounds that might have been heard thousands of years ago, from rustling leaves as animals moved to the thud of a large tree falling. There was a gentle tension, awareness that prehistoric humans lived alongside constant threat and uncertainty. Yet they also recognized the beauty of the natural rhythm of life. From cycles of birth and death to the interactions between various creatures, every second of observation became an immersive experience, connecting the present to the past through quiet and respectful awareness. In a corner of the cave, they discovered a carving older and rougher than the other paintings. The cracked and porous texture suggested that it had witnessed time and changes for thousands of years. The group touched the stone gently, feeling every curve and scratch, as if attempting to read the hidden message behind the symbol. They understood that their interpretation might never be fully correct. Yet the effort to comprehend created a profound connection with the prehistoric humans who created it. They then observed how the moving sunlight affected color and shadow perception within the cave. Shadows of stalactites and stalagmites shifted, creating illusions of moving creatures. Perhaps animals once encountered, or symbols that seemed alive. The group sat in silence, letting imagination roam while respecting the mystery. They understood that the beauty of the cave lay in its ability to raise unanswered questions, and every interpretation was merely an additional layer in the unfinished prehistoric narrative. As time passed, they noticed recurring patterns in the paintings, symbols, and natural traces surrounding the cave. There was a sense that prehistoric humans had deep understanding of natural rhythms, life cycles, and relationships among living beings. These patterns might not be entirely logical by modern standards, but for their creators, they were part of a holistic understanding of the world, where each element had its place and function. The group felt profound at dusk as the sun began to lower its light behind the prehistoric trees. The group slowly re-entered the cave, following the familiar path. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of damp earth mixed with the soft fragrance of moss, reminding them that time continued to move even as the prehistoric world seemed suspended in silence. The evening light penetrated the cracks in the rock, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls, as if narrating ancient stories unheard by modern ears. Every contour of stone, every crack in the wall, and every carved line seemed to hold secrets only understandable when observed calmly, without rush, allowing the mind to float with the natural rhythm of the cave. They approached the paintings previously seen from afar, this time with deeper focus. The fading red hues and nearly vanished black lines depicted scenes of hunting, celebration, and rituals performed by prehistoric humans. The group imagined how the lives of these ancient people depended on courage, ingenuity, and understanding of nature. There were no written records, only symbols and images connecting the present with the past, offering a sense that prehistoric humans were not alien beings, but figures facing challenges similar to those humans experience now, albeit in different forms and contexts. In a corner of the cave, a carving stood out, more abstract and complex than the other paintings. The group sat quietly, trying to interpret its meaning. Perhaps it was a ritual symbol or a prayer, or a message intended for future generations, yet unknown. The evening lights, shadows, made the carving appear alive, as if a figure moved within it, creating the sensation that past and present met in this silent space. they realized that their interpretation could never be fully complete. Yet the effort to understand fostered a profound connection with those who had lived here thousands of years ago. The sky above the cave shifted colors from orange to red, then purple and dark blue, while the sounds of nocturnal animals began to emerge in the distance. The group observed how nature responded to time, how birds returned to their nests, how insects began to hum, and how the night breeze swept the cave floor. All these elements became part of a broader narrative, forming a life rhythm that never ceased, even though prehistoric humans had long left their traces. There was a deep awareness that this cave was not merely a physical place, but a space of memory, a witness to life, fear, and unheard hopes. They imagined prehistoric humans sitting in the same spot, watching the fire or sunlight streaming through the rock cracks, feeling cold and warmth simultaneously, understanding that life always presented dualities to confront. Every line on the cave wall was not merely art, but a record of experience, survival strategies, and spiritual reflection. The group felt an emotional connection with those who created these paintings, recognizing that fear, courage, curiosity, and hope were part of the enduring human nature. They then explored deeper parts of the cave, discovering towering stalactites and stalagmites forming a natural, almost sacred chamber. The echo of their footsteps added a mysterious and spiritual ambience. Shadows cast on the walls as they moved resembled prehistoric creatures or observing spirits, giving the impression that this cave was a place where human and unseen worlds interacted. As night began to cover the sky with its pitch darkness, the group sat at the mouth of the cave, looking at the stars that began to twinkle. Only the sound of the night breeze and the small stream were heard, creating a quiet symphony that blended with the rhythm of their own hearts. They realized that the cave they visited was not just a physical space, but also a portal to the past. A place where ancient life, legendary creatures, and early human beliefs remained alive in every sculptural line and footprint left behind. In the silence of the night, they let their imaginations flow, imagining a life that took place thousands of years ago, when ancient humans faced daily challenges with the same courage, ingenuity, and curiosity they feel now. The group stared at the small bonfire they had created near the mouth of the cave, the light of fire dancing on their faces, creating a changeable shadow on the stone wall. They imagined ancient humans lighting fires to warm themselves, drive out wild animals, and as a gathering center for communities. Fire also becomes a medium for telling stories, delivering messages, or even performing rituals that are believed to bring protection and good luck. Every spark, every movement, seemed to be a small window showing a long-lost world, a world where every night was a struggle and a miracle at once. They turned their heads towards the farthest walls of the cave, where the oldest symbols and paintings appeared faint in the dark. In shadows and dim light, the group tries to interpret abstract forms, linking them to hunting stories, rituals, and everyday life of ancient humans. There is a realization that they will never truly understand the meaning of the symbol, but the attempt to read the hidden message creates a strong sense of connection. They realized that this mystery was not something to be solved, but rather felt, explored, and respected. the sound of night grew lively, with nocturnal animals beginning to chime, leaves rubbing, and the wind carrying the scent of the moist ancient forest. The group left their senses fully open, paying attention to every detail, and feeling the rhythm of life that remained even though ancient humans had long been gone. Each sound, scent, and shadow becomes part of a broader narrative, reminding that life is a multi-sensory experience that cannot be separated from environment and time. They learn to respect every element of nature as witnesses and unwritten treasures of history. In the midst of the silence of the night, they began to think about ancient creatures that might have once roamed around this cave. Fossils and bones left behind give clues about their size, behavior, and existence. But imagination still plays an important role in reviving the shadows of the past. The group imagined the sound of heavy footsteps, the whispering of wind changing direction, and predatory movements lurking from a distance. All this gives a gentle nuance of tension, an awareness that ancient humans coexisted with threats, and at the same time learned to respect the forces of nature. They focused on star patterns in the night sky, trying to imagine how ancient humans interpreted them, perhaps as directions, calendars, or spiritual symbols of belief. The shadows and flames dancing on the walls of the cave seemed to be in harmony with the patterns in the sky, creating a mysterious and alluring symmetry. The group sat in silence, realizing that nature and ancient humans were interconnected in a completely unsolved web of meaning. And each observation provided new insights into how early humans understood their world. They then spoke in a soft whisper, sharing interpretations, questions, and feelings that arose during observation. There is no definitive answer, only reflection that builds respect and connection. There is recognition that ancient humans had cultural, spiritual, and practical complexities that may not have been fully reached. But their existence was still felt through symbols, traces, and connections to nature. The group realized that this experience was not just about learning history, but also about realizing one's own existence in the context of a wider time and honoring the continuing mystery. Finally, they sat in complete silence, letting the night swallow all forms of light and sound they knew. There were only caves, small bonfires, and they themselves, realizing that even though ancient humans were gone, their traces still live on in symbols, walls, and soil. The mystery remains intact, waiting for the interpretation and imagination of every visitor who comes thousands of years later. In that silence, the group felt a deep, calm connectedness to the past, and a realization that most stories remain hidden, waiting to be felt and respected rather than solved. The night deepened, and the sounds of nature became more dominant, as if singing an ancient song that could only be heard by those who were willing to listen. The group stared at the vast cave walls, noticing every curve, crack, and painting left over from the hands of ancient humans. Every line, stain, and texture of the stone seems to speak in a language that has never been fully understood, but can be felt by anyone present with full awareness. They realized that this cave was not only a physical refuge from rain, wind, and predators, but also a spiritual space, a symbolic arena where early humans expressed their fears, hopes, and curiosity towards the world. They thought about how ancient torchlight might dance on the walls as the painting was created, creating shifting shadows and perspectives, giving each symbol and image additional meaning. The night breeze that entered through the cavern's crevices carried the scent of wet soil, moss, and burnt wood remnants, which for them became a sensory bridge to the past. Every gust of wind seemed like the whispers of ancient humans, reminding them that their lives were not dead stories, but something that continued to echo through time, through space, and through the traces they left behind. The group noticed how the cave walls housed layers of history, older scribbles below, newer paintings above, perhaps augmented by different generations, each line having a purpose, each color having a meaning. They imagine ancient humans chose stones, pigments, and locations with great care, perhaps following the rhythm of nature, the direction of the sun, or the direction of rivers to ensure their message survived. In that silence, they understood that each painting was not just art, but also documents, archives, and visual meditations that recorded human life, beliefs, and interactions with the world around them. They contemplate how ancient humans might have used caves as community spaces, gathering places to plan hunts, tell stories, or perform rituals. The sounds of footsteps, heartbeats, and animal groans heard at night may be part of the same sensory experience they feel now. They began to imagine ancient human figures sitting close together, chattering in a language they did not yet understand, hands pointing at certain symbols, and a deep respect for the forces of nature surrounding them. In that imagination, they sensed the presence of ancient creatures that might lurk outside the cave. Bones, fossils, and footprints bear silent witness to life that once existed, and the shadows of large animals give a soft nuance of tension. The group realized that ancient humans lived in a balance between courage and caution, between exploration and awareness of the dangers that lurked, and that every action, from lighting fires to painting paintings, was part of a complicated and meaningful survival strategy. They noticed the interaction between firelight and wall shadows, realizing that the visual perceptions of ancient humans may have been different from theirs, but the basic principle was the same. Light enlivens space, shadows add depth and mystery. Every movement of fire, every spark, creates layers of meaning that seem to connect the present with the past. The group sat in silence, letting this experience sink in, understanding that understanding ancient humans was not about finding answers, but feeling their context, blending with the rhythms of nature, and respecting the mysteries that remained hidden behind the stone walls. Finally, they lowered their heads, letting the sounds of nature, the scent of the cave, and the light of fire bring them into a deep, contemplative state. Their awareness of the limitations of knowledge became part of their respect for lost lives, and the mystery of the cave became a meditation space that allowed them to see ancient life with the eyes of the heart. No words are needed, no answers to be found, just the acceptance that most stories remain hidden, waiting for anyone willing to appreciate the silence, light, and shadow that continues to echo through the ages. Night slowly covered every curve of the cave, and the shadow cast by the torch grew longer and tighter, as if enveloping the entire space in an untouched mystery. The group sat in silence, letting their senses absorb every detail, every scent, and every sound that still lives within the stone chamber. They realized that this cave was not only a silent witness, but also a preserver of experience, holding echoes of hundreds, thousands, perhaps millions of lives that once reached its floor. The stone walls, which looked dead and stiff to them, actually held the energy, intent, and traces of every hand that touched it, every foot that walked on it, and every flame that ever danced before it. They imagined the voices of ancient humans whispering in the same space, repeating the same ritual night after night, generation after generation, and how those sounds mixed with the gusts of wind coming in from the cavernous crevices, creating a natural symphony that could only be understood by those who bowed themselves to silence. Every scratch on the wall, every dot of pigment, is a testament to perseverance and courage, symbolism and prayer, record-keeping and warning. The group tried to understand the possible meanings behind the symbols, but quickly realized that most of these secrets would never be fully revealed. And it was precisely in the uncertainty that the beauty of the cave appeared. They realized that ancient humans lived in a tension between light and dark, between courage and fear, and that their every action, from lighting fires to drawing on walls, was part of a ritual to understand the world and maintain life. Even in the quietest moments, when long shadows wrap around walls and floors, life is present in the form of echoes of footsteps, the smell of firewood smoke, and animal tracks left on the ground. The group allowed themselves to drift into this experience, feeling that time flowed differently, slower, deeper, and as if giving them the opportunity to blend into the consciousness of ancient humans that once existed. They imagined that this cave might be used as a learning space, where the younger generation was taught about animals, plants, and stars in the night sky. Each symbol, each painting, may be a map, guide, or reminder of the wider world of how to survive, how to respect nature, and how to live in harmony with the environment. The group felt an aura of purity in every corner of the cave, as if the same energy that had driven ancient humans to record their lives now resonated through their consciousness, forming an invisible but real bridge of time. Shadows and light play on each other's walls, creating illusions of form and being, as if the cave itself were breathing, staring, and observing. The group realized that this was part of an ancient experience, where light and shadow were tools for understanding the world, conveying stories, and presenting mysteries. They realized that ancient humans not only recorded their lives, but also formed a spiritual space that transcended matter, where meaning, fear, hope, and courage became one with stone, air, and fire. The night grew late, and the silence became denser, more pronounced. The group sat wordlessly, letting admiration, respect, and a hint of fear seep into them. They realized that this cave was not just a physical space, but also a space of imagination, a place where the past and present are united in an experience that cannot be fully explained, where every shadow, every crack, and every scratch has its own story. In that silence, they found a strange calm, a mixture of admiration, respect, and recognition that most ancient life remained hidden, unreachable, and that is what gave meaning to their experiences. Finally, they lowered their heads, closed their eyes for a moment, letting their consciousness merge with the cave. with shadows, and with the energy left over from thousands of lives that had passed. They realize that understanding the past is not about finding answers, but about being present, feeling, and respecting every layer of time, every whisper from the past waiting to be heard. In that silence, the mystery of the cave remained alive, waiting, and still teaching that even though much was lost, every trace of life, no matter how small, still gave an eternal echo through space and time. As night reached its peak and the air inside the cave felt increasingly cold and silent, the group slowly stood up, wiped the dust off their clothes, and stared at the walls filled with paintings and symbols that had survived for thousands of years. They realized that every scratch was not just a picture, but the voice of a soul that had long left this world, a message that whispered without a word. A prayer that remained alive even though the man who wrote it had long been gone. In that almost sacred silence, they felt a mixture of admiration and sadness. Between curiosity and the realization that most secrets would remain hidden only through intuition and imagination, they stepped slowly towards the cave door, with the last torch flickering before extinguishing, leaving them in a warm yet mysterious dark. Outside, the night breeze blew gently, carrying the scent of wet soil and stepped leaves, reminding them that the outside world has its own story, and that life continues despite thousands of years separating the present from ancient times. Every step they took felt like crossing a time bridge, connecting them with the humans who lit the first fire, who drew on the walls of the cave, and who stared at the night sky with the same awe. On their way home, they let themselves be lulled by the shadows and sounds of nature, letting their imaginations dance between memories and possibilities. They envisioned ancient children who learned about animals through pictures on the walls, parents who held knowledge of seasons and hunting, and spiritual leaders who lit fires and guided rituals. Every shadow they saw, every whisper of wind that was heard, became a reminder that the past remained alive, not only in the form of artifacts and paintings, but also in the experiences and feelings they could feel, albeit thousands of years apart. The group paused at the top of the hill, staring at the moonlight reflecting on the river's surface, and felt as if the cave they had just left was staring back at them, keeping the same secret, but still giving space for imagination to fill the void. They smiled gently, understanding that mystery is a gift, that silence and uncertainty give life to imagination and to curiosity. They know that not everything they want to understand will ever be answered. But perhaps in that uncertainty there is peace, like hearing a song that never ends, but is still beautiful to listen to. As they walked back to the village, they allowed themselves to dissolve into a strange sense of peace, a mixture of nostalgia, respect, and tranquility. Every step felt light, even though their minds were full of questions and images that they would continue to remember. They knew that this experience would stay alive within them, that every flashing torch in the cave, every red and black line on the wall had left an indelible mark, not only on the stone, but also on their hearts. They arrived at home, lighting a fire to warm the body and soul. But in their hearts, the fire was just a shadow of the ancient flames they had left behind. They sat in silence, thinking about the faces and steps that once lived in the cave, and letting a sense of wonder and melancholy wrap around their minds. They know that the ancient world remains hidden behind rocks, soil, and shadows, always waiting to be discovered, always giving an echo that reminds them that time is just a layer, and each layer brings a story that never really ends. Close their eyes to rest, they let their imaginations drift, traversing the dark passages of caves, staring at paintings that have survived thousands of years, and hearing whispers that no one else has heard. They let themselves be swept away by a sense of peace and mystery, knowing that even in sleep, they are still connected to a lost life, but never completely disappear. They embraced silence, accepted uncertainty, and let wonder become a soft lullaby, as if the ancient cave was still watching, still talking, and still waiting to tell another story the next night. Slowly, their eyes closed completely, and the ancient world remained alive in their dreams. They know that even though they will wake up tomorrow, tonight's experience will remain lasting, leaving a strange sense of warmth and peace, where wonder and mystery merge into one. And in eternal silence, they realized that the ancient world, with all its secrets and whispers, was waiting to be discovered, still taught life, courage, and respect, and still allowed them to be swept away by shadows and lights that could never be separated. In that silence, the night subsided, and the world again revolved with the same rhythm, carrying today's people through tomorrow with stories that still live on the walls of caves, on the ground they trod, and in hearts that accept the ancient heritage with a sense of wonder and peace. And like a fairy tale that never ends, mystery hangs, waiting for the brave spies and hearts to come and hear. And every night, like every generation of ancient humans, gives an opportunity to see, feel, and appreciate the life that has been lost, but still lives through echoes and shadows that never completely fade.